Welcome to the Kids Bedtime Stories channel. If you enjoy our stories, please don't forget to subscribe. You are listening to a tale from the series Millie and the Ribbon Bridge. This is episode 4, The Sunlit River of Thanks. Sit comfortably. Take a slow, steady breath and let Millie guide you to a place where light flows together with water. Let us begin. The mist of the mirror, mist marsh faded behind Millie more quickly than she had expected. With every step, the air grew brighter, lighter, warmer. The ground was no longer soft and damp. Beneath her boots appeared smooth stones, warmed by the sun, pale as though polished by light itself. And then she heard it. Not the wind, not a rustle, the gentle murmur of water. Millie quickened her pace. Before her opened a wide valley, and through its center flowed a river. Not wild, not rushing, but calm, broad, and gleaming like liquid gold. The sun reflected upon it in thousands of tiny sparks. Each ripple carried the light onward, as though the river understood that its purpose was to share brightness. "Oh," Millie whispered. The air smelled of warm grass and something fresh, faintly citrus. Small luminous specks hovered above the water, and water birds perched upon stones, stretching their wings lazily in the glow. Millie stepped closer to the bank. Her bracelet, bearing 3 knots, the leaf, the spiral, and the drop, pulsed gently at her wrist. She felt that this place was different from the realms she had visited before, brighter. And yet, she paused. Only now did she notice it. Not all of the river shone equally. The main current flowed wide and steady, but several smaller branches that curved away to the sides looked different. The water there was shallower, the light dimmer, the movement slower. One branch barely moved at all. Millie crouched near the edge. "Why is it so quiet here?" she asked softly. At that very moment, something stirred upon the surface of the water. From the bright current, a figure rose. She did not leap. She did not appear suddenly. It was as if she had always been part of the river and had simply chosen to step closer. Her hair was the color of golden light dancing on water. Her gown shimmered like flowing reflections, shifting with every movement. When she took a step, the water gently lifted around her feet. "Welcome, Millie," she said warmly. Her voice sounded like a calm current. "How do you know my name?" Millie asked, standing. The fairy smiled. "The river hears many things," she replied. "I am the Sunlit River Fairy." Millie glanced at the river, then back at the fairy. "It's beautiful," she said honestly. The fairy nodded. "It is, and it always has been." She hesitated. It was only a brief pause, so brief that someone less attentive might have missed it. But Millie noticed. "But?" she asked gently. The fairy looked toward the water. "But it does not flow as it should everywhere." Millie followed her gaze. Near one of the smaller branches, tiny fish gathered. They swam slowly close to the surface, as though they had nowhere left to go. On the bank stood a cluster of smooth, pale stones. One of them sighed quietly. "It used to be brighter here," it murmured. "And warmer," added a water plant whose leaves lay flat upon the surface. "Now the light hardly reaches." "The river doesn't give as much as it once did," said a water bird, adjusting its feathers. "Something always fades." Millie felt a small tightening inside her chest. But she glanced toward the main current. "It's still flowing beautifully there." "Yes," the fairy replied. "I offer light each day. I make sure the river carries it forward." Her voice remained calm, but Millie sensed weariness beneath it. And yet, the fairy looked again toward the smaller branches. Something has stopped flowing. At that moment, one of the narrow channels trembled. The water receded by a few inches. The fish drifted closer together. The light dimmed. "Oh," Millie breathed. She looked at her bracelet. The knots were warm, but as if waiting. "Has anyone tried," Millie began carefully, "to ask the river what it needs?" The fairy looked at her, surprised. "The river gives," she said automatically. "It has always given." "And has anyone ever thanked it?" Millie asked. Silence fell. Not heavy, but suspended. The light upon the water trembled. The fairy looked at the river, then at the stones, the fish, the plants. She began slowly. "I give thanks when something goes well, when the current is strong, when the light shines brightly." She paused. "But when something weakens," she added more quietly, "I think only of what is missing." Millie felt that this was important. In the smaller branch, the water slowed further, as if the river itself were listening. The smaller branch of the river trembled again. The water withdrew another small step, not violently, not with a crash, slowly, as if someone were very carefully drawing light out of it. The little fish swam closer together. One of them tried to dive deeper, but beneath it there was only shallow, warm mud. "Not enough space," it said quietly. The stone at the bank sighed. "I told you it used to be better." The water plant shifted its leaves. If only the sun shone stronger. If only the river flowed faster. If only someone did something. The voices were not unkind. They were tired and full of lack. Millie looked toward the main current. There, the water still flowed wide. The light reflected brightly, and yet, even there, the glow seemed slightly less vivid than a moment before. Is it because everyone keeps thinking about what isn't here? She asked softly. The Sunlit River Fairy stood motionless upon the water. Her gown moved gently, but the light around her had dimmed. The river returns what it hears, she said slowly, and lately it hears mostly absence. Millie stepped closer to the fading branch. She crouched. She placed her hand into the water. It was warm, but too still. It carried no movement. "Thank you," Millie said suddenly. The fish looked at her in surprise. The stone lifted slightly, as if trying to hear better. "For what?" it asked. Millie smiled faintly. "For bringing me here," she said to the river. "For carrying me through other realms. For the light that reflects in your water." The surface beneath her hand trembled very gently. A small spark of light ran across it. "That's just coincidence," muttered the stone. "Probably the wind," added the plant. Millie glanced at her bracelet. The 3 knots were warmer now, not yet brighter, but responding. "Thank you," she repeated, this time to a small fish, "for still swimming here, even when it's shallow." The fish flicked its tail. The water around it formed a tiny circle. The light there brightened just a little. The Sunlit River Fairy stepped closer. "That isn't mere politeness," she said quietly. "It shifts the current." At that very moment, one of the fish spoke hesitantly. "Thank you that the water still carries me." A small glimmer appeared near its fin. The stone remained silent for a moment, then cleared its throat. "Thank you that I still have warmth to hold," it said awkwardly. The glow along the bank grew clearer. The water plant lifted its leaves. "Thank you that you still reflect the sun," it whispered to the river. The smaller branch trembled. The water moved more quickly, not violently, but noticeably. Millie felt warmth at her wrist, yet at the same moment, another voice called from farther down the branch. "It won't change anything," said the water bird. "There's still less than before." The light dimmed slightly. The fish hesitated. The movement slowed again. Millie understood that this would not be one single thank you. It had to be more. "Has anyone given thanks, even for what remains?" she asked. The Sunlit River Fairy studied the water carefully. "I have focused on what weakens," she admitted softly, "not on what still flows." Millie rose. She walked a few steps toward the main current. She stood upon a smooth stone in the middle of a shallow stretch. The sun reflected around her in rippling gold. "Thank you for every step I can take here," she said steadily. "Thank you for the light that returns even after shadow. Thank you that the river still tries to flow." Her voice was not loud, but it was certain. The water around the stone began to move faster. Light spread outward in widening circles. It reached the smaller branch. The fish lifted higher. The stone warmed more deeply. The plant raised its leaves. The current was not yet full, but it was returning. The Sunlit River Fairy watched in silence. Something new appeared in her eyes, not only weariness, understanding. "The river does not weaken from lack of light," she said slowly. "It weaks when it stops hearing gratitude." Millie looked at her bracelet. The 3 knots shone brighter, but she sensed that something more was about to happen. One branch, the shallowest one, was still faint. Its light was only a shadow. "Over there," Millie said quietly, and she stepped down from the stone toward the place where the water had almost ceased to flow. The smallest branch of the river was now almost completely still. Water rested shallowly between the stones. The light reached it more faintly, as though it no longer had the strength to reflect itself forward. A tiny fish flicked its tail, but the water barely responded. The Sunlit River Fairy stood at the bank. "This is where the current stops first," she said softly. "When absence is heard more often than gratitude." Millie stepped carefully into the shallow water. It was not cold. It was warm, but without movement. "Thank you," she whispered, "for carrying me even now." The water beneath her feet stirred slightly, but it was still not enough. The water bird settled on a stone. "Saying thank you won't make there be more of it," he muttered. The stone remained silent. The water plant lowered its leaves a little. The Sunlit River Fairy closed her eyes. "I gave light every day," she said calmly. "But I did not give thanks that the river still tries to flow even when there is less of it." She opened her eyes. She looked toward the smallest branch. "Thank you," she said to the water, "for not stopping, even when it is difficult." Her voice was warm, not formal, not ceremonial, sincere. At once, a small ripple moved across the surface, very gently. The little fish lifted higher. "Thank you," it said quietly. The stone shifted slightly. "Thank you for still warming me." The plant raised its leaves. "Thank you for every ray." The water bird looked at the water. He hesitated. "Thank you that I still have somewhere to return." Light began gathering in one place, not suddenly, slowly, as if all the small thank yous were joining into a single stream. Millie closed her eyes. She thought of the path she had walked, of the leaves whispering in the first realm, of the wind high above the clouds, of the mist that parted when she asked a question. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything that brought me here." The bracelet at her wrist grew warmer than ever before, not like sunlight upon skin, more like light spreading outward from within. The story string stirred, not in a spiral, not like a drop. This time, threads of light spread outward in radiant lines, as if from a single point many slender rays burst forth. A new knot began to form. Slowly, two lines crossed at the center, then others circled them in a gentle ring. It looked like a small sun enclosed within a circle. At its heart glowed a golden point. A soft sound followed, not like a drop, not like wind, like a ray of light expanding outward. The gratitude knot. Warmth flowed through the entire bracelet. The leaf, the spiral, and the drop shone brighter, as if answering the new knot. At that same moment, the smallest branch of the river moved distinctly. The water began to flow, first as a narrow thread, then wider. The fish swam forward. The stones settled deeper into the water. The plant lifted its leaves high, catching the light. The water bird spread his wings. The main current of the river brightened. Light scattered in 1,000 sparks. The Sunlit River Fairy smiled widely, the first true smile since Millie had arrived. "Gratitude is not only a word," she said softly. "It is a current." Millie looked at her bracelet. 4 knots now shone together, listening, calm, questioning, gratitude. "Each one restores something," Millie said quietly. The fairy nodded, and when they flow together, the river does not dry. The light upon the water was now steady, not blinding, not excessive, whole. The sunlit river. Fairy stepped closer to Millie. The water beneath her feet was bright and alive. "Thank you," she said, looking into the girl's eyes. "Not only for the river, for reminding me how to listen to what is already flowing." Millie smiled softly. and you showed me that light can return," she replied. The fairy extended her hand. It was neither wet nor cold. It was warm like a sunbeam. When she touched Millie's wrist, the gratitude knot glowed more brightly for a brief moment. "If ever you feel there is less of something," she said gently, "begin by giving thanks for what still remains." Millie nodded. Behind them, the river now flowed wide and bright. "I will remember," she said. The Sunlit River Fairy stepped back. Her gown began to blend with the river's glow. She did not vanish suddenly. Slowly, she became part of the current. "Go on, Millie," she said one last time. "Your path is still flowing." And then the light around her scattered across the river like a golden trace. On the horizon, something new began to appear. Not golden light, not mist, not clouds. A soft expanse where the first small points of brightness were beginning to glow. Like a meadow beneath an evening sky. Millie felt a gentle stirring in her heart. A new realm was waiting. "Thank you," she whispered once more, this time quietly to the river, and she walked toward the place where sunlight began to give way to stars. This was the fourth part of the series, Millie and the Ribbon Bridge. In the next episode, Millie will arrive in a place where nightlight requires courage and quiet choices illuminate the dark. Will she learn another knot? We will discover that in the next chapter. Thank you for listening to Kids Bedtime Stories. If you enjoy our stories, please subscribe. Until next time.